In exactly 47 seconds, Denzel Washington placed a sealed envelope on the desk. Not slammed as firm enough to stop a room full of power. Inside, a DNA test, a child's name, and the bloodline of a sitting president. Gasps erupted. Cameras zoomed in. Trump's smirk twitched live in front of 38 million Americans. What truth could be so devastating? Enough to make the most powerful man alive appear like he had seen a ghost. The red tally light blinked once, then locked. Live inside Capitol Hill's Oversight Committee chamber. A silence took over, the kind only live television could create, where every cough, every shuffle, every breath became national. The marble walls didn't just echo, they waited. Camera rails slid like panthers across the broadcast room, hunting reactions. On one side, his aides flipped through color-coded prep books. On the other, journalists typed like their screens were burning. Then he walked in. Denzel Washington. He didn't enter like a congressman. He entered like a man with nothing to prove, and everything to deliver. His signature stillness was sharper today. No fire, just steel. Controlled. Deliberate. He didn't look around. He didn't smile. He passed the tension without acknowledgement. Every step of his polished shoes hit like seconds on a countdown clock. In his left hand, a manila envelope sealed tight, corners creased. In his right, a worn black notebook, a single word etched across the cover. Lucia. Across the room, Donald J. Trump was already seated. Secret Service to his left, legal counsel to his right, a curated media team circling like stylists on a red carpet. He wore a navy blue, the loud red tie catching lights like an alarm. He looked too comfortable, like this was just another episode, and Denzel, just another guest star. The chairman cleared his throat. This oversight session will examine the alleged misuse of humanitarian funds designated for migrant families detained at the southern border. Formal, dry, theater. But everyone knew the headline. Where did the missing $6.7 million go? And who signed for it? Denzel hadn't spoken yet, but he tapped the envelope twice. Soft, purposeful, then spoke beside the mic. He never looked at it, didn't need to. He had memorized every word inside, every digit of the lab report, every line of the affidavit. This wasn't paper, it was weight. A truth he'd carried for 3 weeks, which in the next 19 minutes would stop being his alone. Trump adjusted in his chair, leaned forward, whispered to his aide. The aide chuckled low, smug. Denzel heard it. Didn't blink. He opened the notebook. Skippum asked page after page of questions, landing on a single grainy black and white photo, time-stamped, dog-eared. He slid it under his notes, half visible, half in shadow. Camera 1 panned to Denzel's face. Camera 2 zoomed in on Trump's hands, now fidgeting. A young congressman leaned toward him, whispered, "You sure about this?" Denzel's only answer, a steady exhale, the kind a judge takes before a verdict. The chairman nodded. "Mr. Washington, your time begins now." He adjusted the mic, slow, precise, still staring at the envelope. Not yet. Truth doesn't land in one punch. It's not theater. It's surgery. He leaned forward. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." His voice calm. To calm. The kind that makes the whole room lean in. "What's in that envelope?" he said. It makes a president wish these cameras never existed. He hadn't even reached a second question before Trump pounced. He leaned forward, adjusted the mic, and tossed it out like a line rehearsed. All morning. People like him don't understand family values. It landed like gasoline. Boom. The Republican side cracked up, laughter spreading like dry grass to flame. A few aides chuckled. One congressman clapped. And for a beat, the room tilted Trump's way. That smirk widened. He thought he landed something. But Denzel didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even look at him. He let the words hang, let them bounce off the marble walls until they settled like ash. His fingers tapped the envelope, once, then silence. Beneath the desk, out of camera view, his thumb found the flap of that manila envelope. The truth was an inch away from daylight, but not yet. In his mind, everything else faded: the laughter, the lights, the theater, and suddenly he was back. Back in that quiet church basement in San Antonio, 3 weeks ago. The air thick with incense. A rosary on the wall across from him. Maria Alvarez, eyes rimmed red, hands trembling as she slid the envelope across the table. "I kept it hidden for years," she whispered, her accent broken by guilt. "I was scared. He was powerful. I was invisible." Maria's voice cracked. In that church basement, Denzel Washington didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He simply accepted the envelope with both hands, like a sacred object. He opened it with precision. Inside a notarized DNA test. The result, paternity match, 99.98%. At the top, Lucia Maria Alvarez, age 11, father Donald J. Trump. Denzel didn't speak for nearly a full minute. He just placed a steady hand over Maria's trembling one and said, "They'll see her now. I'll make sure of it." Back in the hearing room, Denzel shifted ever so slightly in his chair. The audience couldn't see it, but his left hand returned to the envelope. His finger slid gently under the flap. The seal cracked, not torn, just enough. He could feel the edge of the DNA report, the corner of the photo, a folded letter, purple, ink, twice scrolled. His pulse thudded once. Against his ribs, he looked up. Trump was sipping water with that same smug lean. Somewhere in the back row, a Fox News commentator scribbled a headline, "Washington wavers." Denzel closed the envelope. Not yet. 7 minutes, 38 million viewers. And now the gravity in the room leaned toward him. Every second he remained silent, Trump's posture shrank. Every breath of Denzel's calm made Trump's bravado look louder and hollower. He glanced at the chairman, then back to the man who had mocked him. The man whose name sat in bold at the top of a paternity test. Denzel smiled, not wide, just enough to say, "I know what you don't." He squared the papers in front of him, cleared his throat, then launched into his next question. Not about Lucia, not yet, but about the missing 6.7 million that never made it to migrant shelters. Because justice doesn't always kick the door in. Sometimes it walks in quietly and waits for the right silence. He had 7 minutes, and the nation watching. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He leaned slightly toward the mic, fingertips brushing the envelope's edge, as if holding something sacred or radioactive. And the room obeyed. Camera operators slowed their movements. A hum of recognition passed through the silence. Something irreversible was coming. His voice came low, steady. "I wasn't planning to do this today, but you brought up family." That word family hung in the air like smoke. Trump's own word, weaponized minutes ago, now returning like a boomerang edged in glass. Denzel reached forward and placed the envelope on the witness table, centered, flat. The light hit it just right. The yellow edges glowed under his fingers. It looked ordinary, but the entire room could feel it ticking. Trump tilted his head, narrowed his eyes. The smirk wavered, just a hair. One of his aides leaned in, whispering something sharp. He waved him off, crossed his arms. Denzel didn't look at him. He opened the black notebook, passed scribbled policy notes, and slipped out a single sheet of white paper. He didn't read from it. He just held it between his fingers, letting the silence spread until tension coiled around everyone's chest, then soft, certain. Lucia Alvarez, 11 years old, no father, until this DNA test. At first, nothing, just pure, painful stillness. Then one gasp. Papers shuffled. A pen hit the floor. Someone coughed, trying to cover the tension. Failed. Trump surged forward, gripping the table. "And this is ridiculous. That's not relevant to this hearing. This is fake." His voice rose, but his grip on the room broke. He glanced at the chairman, expecting rescue. Denzel didn't flinch. Test performed by 2 independent labs. Filed under seal for the child's protection. Now unsealed. He tapped the envelope once. It echoed. The chairman adjusted in his seat, nervous. "Mr. Washington, please stay on topic." Denzel's reply came cool, controlled. "I am on topic. The topic is truth, and this child deserves it." He reached into his folder again, pulled out a second document, didn't raise it, didn't wave it around, just laid it beside the envelope, calm, precise. His breathing stayed level, his voice unmoved. Trump stood now, fully, finger outstretched. "This is a political hit job. This is disgusting." Denzel's reply sliced clean through his noise. "She's not politics. She's a girl, a citizen. A name you refuse to say." Gasps, this time loud. One congresswoman covered her mouth. Reporters scrambled. Even CSPAN's live captions stalled mid-sentence, like they didn't know what to type. Denzel reached into his folder one last time. A photograph. He didn't lift it, didn't hold it up, didn't give the cameras what they wanted. He just placed it gently, face down, on top of the envelope. He looked at it, then waited. And when Denzel Washington looked up, he wasn't seeking permission. He wasn't asking for sympathy. He was offering a reckoning that, for truth, had been buried too long. "What will America do?" he asked quietly. when it sees what I left behind. For one long second, the photograph sat on the desk, still face down, silent as a loaded secret, waiting for its trigger. Denzel didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, he returned to the envelope, slid his finger beneath the flap. This time, he drew out a crisp sheet of white federally stamped, undeniable. He didn't wave it like a flag, didn't perform. He just held it up, shoulder level, perfectly still. Let the camera do its work. And under the lights, the federal court's seal gleamed like a verdict. The room inhaled and held it. This, he said, voice unwavering, is a verified DNA test, witnessed, notarized, confirmed by 2 separate labs. Then he read it aloud. Subject A, Donald John Trump. Subject B, Lucia Maria Alvarez. Paternity probability, 99-98%. Gasps erupted like shrapnel. The temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. Even the marble seemed to pause. Aides froze. Pens midair. Reporters lunged for their phones. In the media pit, someone from Fox News muttered a curse. Ticker stuttered. Split screens blinked on. Twitter ignited. Across the country, 38 million Americans leaned forward at the same time. Denzel didn't blink. This child is not a rumor. She is not a footnote. She is not a headline. She is a living, breathing citizen with rights. On screen, Trump's jaw tensed so hard the veins in his neck bulged. One fist clenched against the desk. His team scrambled. A young aide rushed in to whisper, but Trump waved him off like a fist. He still hadn't spoken. Denzel placed the DNA test flat on the desk, next to the photo still face down. He adjusted the mic. This isn't theater. It's accountability. His voice had no fire. It didn't need it. This was about a man in power who abandoned a child while preaching values to this country. He let that land. Let it sit. Then Trump could say it's fake. Call it a stunt. But science doesn't vote red or blue. It just reveals. The audience didn't move. One reporter slowly removed her glasses, stunned. Another silently mouthed, "Oh my God," into the camera. Split screens showed 2 faces. DenzelWashington.com, resolute, immovable. Trump, jaw locked, sweat blooming at his temple. It was damning not because it was loud, but because it was still. The chairman tried to cut in. "Congressman Washington, perhaps we should redirect." "I am on topic," Denzel interrupted, crisp and sharp. "The topic is the misuse of humanitarian funds. And tell me, what's more inhumane than abandoning your own child in a detention camp?" The silence that followed hit harder than any outburst. He tapped the photo, still face down, still untouched, a promise waiting. Donald Trump diverted $6.7 million, meant for migrant aid, while one of those migrants, his own daughter, sat in a concrete cell for 36 hours. No food. No contact. No father. "That's not just corruption," he said, voice low. "That's blood money." The room trembled not in noise, but in feeling. A low hum, human, uncontainable, rolled across the chamber. Then finally, Trump leaned in. "You don't have the right," he snapped. Denzel raised his hand, palm open. "I do." Quiet. Final. "Because she's not just some case file. She's not a number. She's a little girl who looks just like him and who's waited 11 years to be seen." Then he turned not to the chairman, not to the press, but to the camera. "America, and I haven't even shown you the worst of it." He reached toward the photograph, but he didn't flip it. He wasn't done because he had more than documents. He had testimony. Denzel didn't speak. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached beneath his files, pulled a small matte black remote, pressed a button no larger than his thumbprint. The screens behind him flickered, then blacked out. For a second, the room dimmed. Then the video began. No soundtrack. No effects. No edits. Just a woman in a folding chair, faded blue blouse, a silver cross heavy around her collarbone. White text appeared. Maria Alvarez. She looked into the lens, eyes swollen but dry. Her voice cracked once, but never broke. "I met him when I was 19, she said. "I worked at Mar-a-Lago, cleaning rooms, folding towels, serving cocktails I couldn't pronounce." Gasps from the gallery. Some shifted, uncomfortable. Others leaned in. "I never asked for anything. I was undocumented. I was invisible. And that's exactly how he wanted it." She folded her hands in her lap. Denzel didn't blink. He stood motionless, watching the screen, letting her speak. "I told him I was pregnant," she said. He looked at me and said, "You'll disappear. Understand?" Maria paused, took a breath, then looked directly into the lens again. I did disappear. I ran. I changed my name. I raised Lucy with 2 jobs and 1 prayer that she'd never feel unwanted. In the chamber, a few members of the press quietly wiped their eyes. One conservative representative shook his head not in anger, but disbelief. I never filed a lawsuit. Never went to the press. I was afraid of what he could do, of what he'd take, of what he'd call me. Her hands tightened in her lap, knuckles pale, lips trembling. But then she looked up, and her face hardened. But my daughter won't disappear. Not anymore. The screen cut to black. No fade out, no music. Just silence. At the front of the chamber, Denzel Washington didn't move. Both hands rested flat on the table. The room was dead quiet, but the emotion inside it was deafening. Trump didn't speak. His knuckles clenched white against the desk. His legal team shell-shocked, not because they didn't expect drama, but because they didn't expect it to feel this real. Denzel finally turned not to the chairman, not to the press, but to the people behind him. His voice barely rose. You heard her. You saw her, and you know she didn't lie. Then he turned to face Trump. You told Maria to vanish. But this time, you can't erase her child. 1 second passed, then another. He picked up the remote, clicked once. A new video loaded lighter, softer. A child's drawing appeared. Purple crayon. A sun, a heart, to stick. Figures holding hands. Then a voice. Young, quiet, brave. Hi, my name is Lucia. I think my daddy is on TV. I don't know if he remembers me, but I hope he does. The room cracked. This wasn't a mother. This was a child. The screen remained black, but the voice filled everything. No music, no filters. Just a little girl speaking into a borrowed phone. Dear Dad, Lucia's voice was soft, careful, like she had no idea the entire world was listening. I hope one day you see me. I look like you. That's what Mama says. No one in the room breathed. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Denzel stood with his hands clasped, head bowed slightly. Not in weakness, but in reverence. The kind of stillness that lets pain speak for itself. I'm in 5th grade. My favorite color is purple. I like drawing dogs and people with funny hair. I drew you once, but I messed up the tie. A muffled laugh from the gallery choked instantly into a cough. The chairman adjusted his glasses, but didn't dare interrupt. I don't know why. You don't talk to Mama, Lucia said slower now. But I hope you're okay. I'm okay too, except when I'm not. Trump shifted in his seat, jaw clenched hard. His fingers tapped the desk once, then stopped. He leaned toward the mic. This is a setup. This is disgusting. Mr. President, the chairman snapped, voice cutting. You are not recognized at this time. But Lucia's voice kept playing, untouched. I had a dream last week. You gave me a cupcake. Red, white, and blue sprinkles. Mama said, maybe, that means you still think about me. I just want to know what your voice sounds like. Love, Lucia. Then, nothing. Just silence. Not empty. Full. Full of heartbreak. Full of things ignored. Full of what it means to be forgotten. Denzel lifted his head slowly, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was controlled. So much so, that it hit harder than if he'd shouted. This little girl waited 11 years. Can the president spare 11 seconds to look at her face? He reached down, picked up the photograph, the same one he had placed face down at the beginning. He didn't hesitate. He turned it over and set it on the table. For the cameras, for Congress, for the country. The image was clear. No blurs, no deniability. Trump at a charity gala, cradling a baby girl. Silver backdrop. Name tag still clipped to his lapel. Lucia's eyes stared into the camera. From the pip into the present. Gasps tore through the room. Reporters stood. Some covered their mouths. Others simply froze. Trump didn't move, didn't speak. His jaw flexed, but no sound came. And then, without raising his voice, without pointing a single finger, Denzel Washington looked down at the photograph he had just placed. And the world saw what he left behind. But that wasn't the end. Because Denzel had uncovered something more. Something even the White House didn't see coming. The photo sat on the table. Small, silent, but ticking like a detonator. And Denzel let it breathe. Let the weight settle. Let it land in the room like a verdict. Like a sentence passed. Then, with slow, deliberate precision, Denzel Washington turned the photo toward the cameras. Grainy, yes, but unmistakable. A younger Donald Trump. Black tuxedo. A baby in white cradled in one arm. The hand beneath her head stiff, staged behind him a Mar-a-Lago backdrop. Gold trim shimmering. donor banners fluttering quietly in the corners of the image. Gasps flickered again through the chamber. Reporters leaned in. Analysts at Network HQ scrambled to verify. But Denzel didn't stall. He didn't wait for effect. "This photograph," he said, voice sharp and crystal clear, "was taken on February 11, 2012, during the Hearts for Hope charity gala at Mar-a-Lago." He lifted another document, color printed, court-stamped, official. "This is the event schedule from that night." He raised a second sheet, steady in his hand. "And this," he said, "is then President Trump's confirmed calendar entry, placing him at that gala between 6:30 p.m. and 9:45 p.m. Trump shifted, his face still, but around the eyes, something twitched. Suddenly, his lawyer stood up, tugging at his tie, approaching the mic fast. "Objection. That photo has no legal foundation. No verified source. This is reckless slander on live television." Denzel didn't blink. He was already lifting the next piece of evidence. "Objection overruled," he said. Before the chairman could even respond, the gallery murmured. His tone wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. From his folder, he drew out a small black flash drive. He held it up, then slid it across the table like it was a loaded weapon. "This contains the original metadata from the photographer's camera, time-stamped, geotagged, verified by 3 separate forensic analysts from the House Oversight Tech Division." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Feel free to review it. It'll tell you what the rest of us already see." Trump's lawyer opened his mouth, but Denzel cut him off, his words like a scalpel. "If the president wants to deny the photo, he's free to testify under oath. But until then, the evidence speaks louder than his team." Trump's jaw locked, his hand wrapped tight around the mic. He didn't speak. Behind Denzel, the screen now displayed the photo projected, 10 feet tall. Trump wasn't a leader, wasn't a father, just caught. The room wasn't just quiet. It was tense, dense, breathless. Every unsaid word thickened the air. Then Denzel leaned forward slightly. "This isn't just a picture, it's proof. Proof that this little girl didn't make him up. That Maria didn't lie. That the man who lectures this nation on family values once held his daughter in his arms, and then chose to pretend she never existed." He stepped back. The photo, still glowing on the table, now reflected in every glass surface in the chamber. Journalists blasted it across feeds. Anchors rewrote live scripts. America leaned closer. But Denzel wasn't finished. He looked to the committee, and this time his voice shifted softer, but heavier. "I didn't come alone today." He turned to the side door of the chamber. Someone had been waiting 12 years to speak. The door clicked open. Every head turned. Denzel didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His eyes tracked the figure, entering, a modest brown blazer, neatly combed white hair, sensible shoes. She walked not with nerves, but with the quiet dignity of someone who'd spent decades in colder hallways than this one. Clara Estestine, retired nurse, former deliverer, staff, Palm Beach Women's Clinic. Today, the witness no one saw coming. She stepped to the mic. Her voice, aged but steady, moved through the chamber, like the first crack in a dam. "My name is Clara Esteban. I was a registered nurse for 32 years. In 2012, I assisted in the delivery of a baby girl at Palmetto Care Clinic. The mother was Maria Alvarez." She glanced once at Trump. He didn't blink, but his shoulders squared, his chin tightened. Clara went on. "Normally, I wouldn't be permitted to speak about this, but Maria consented to release. She wants the truth told." Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice never wavered. The mother arrived alone, spoke little English. She was scared, kept asking if the father would come. She paused, exhaled. About 30 minutes after the baby was born, a man came in through the back hallway. No security, no announcement. Just a heavy coat, a baseball cap, and a very recognizable face. The room froze. Trump didn't move, but his jaw locked again. Clara looked down for a moment, then back up. "I was in the nursery station. I saw him. He didn't say much. He held the child for maybe 20 seconds. Then he placed a gift bag beside the crib, inside a plush elephant and a small envelope." She reached slowly into her purse. The room collectively inhaled. Clara held up a photograph. Its corners yellowed, the edges curled with time. Inside the frame a folded note, gold script, delicate, aged. "For my little Lucia D." She paused. "I remember asking him," she said quietly, "should I write the father's name on the certificate?" She looked down. He shook his head. Told her, "Don't bother. This never happened. Clara swallowed hard. I didn't say a word. Not that night. Not for 12 years. Because I was afraid of what he could do. Afraid of what people would say. Then she turned. Not to the press. Not to Trump. But to Denzel Washington. But today, she said, voice steady, I'm not afraid anymore. She faced the committee. Now, her final words dropped like a gavel. I kept quiet until today because truth has a birth date. 2. The chamber broke into whispers. Reporters scrambled. Aides knocked over glasses. Camera lights flared white hot. Trump sat frozen. Color drained from his face. His hands flexed on the desk. But no words came. Not even denial. Denzel stood beside Clara now. Still silent. Still steady. He placed the photograph she had brought next to the DNA test. 3 documents. 3 lives. 1 truth. Then he looked up. His voice calm. Icy. The evidence has spoken. The witness has spoken. He turned to the chairman. And now, so will I. With truth stacked and silence shattered, Denzel Washington made his final move. The lighting hadn't changed. The cameras were still rolling. But the energy inside the room had shifted, like the air itself had thickened. He didn't speak, not yet. Instead, he reached under his binder and lifted something small. So unassuming that, for a moment, no one understood what it was. Not a document. Not a photograph. Not even a file. A cloth bracelet. Child-sized. Tattered. Faded pink. Stained. Frayed at the seams, like the system that let it exist. Across the center, still visible under grime and blood. Trump 2020. America first. A hush swept across the room like a curtain falling. Denzel held it up by 2 fingers. His hand trembled not from fear, but from fury held still. The bracelet didn't need a speech, but he gave it a voice anyway. This was Lucius, he said. Voice calm but raw. Found on her wrist when she was detained last year in McAllen, Texas. Her ID tag had snapped. And this is what they replaced it with. He looked at the bracelet, then back up. His eyes sharpened. His voice rose just enough to cut. She had a fever. A cut on her arm from a fence post. She asked for help. They gave her bottled water. Left her on a cot for 2 days. No insulin. No medical file. Just this. His fingers curled around the bracelet. She bled through it by the second night. Gasps again, but this time deeper, sadder, angrier. A woman in the back wiped her cheek. A reporter lowered his pen. Eyes wide, stunned. Denzel continued. She bled, he said slowly. And they wrapped her in a campaign slogan. He set the bracelet down beside the DNA test. Beside the photo, beside the gift bag. A line was forming. A trail. A truth too ugly to spin. Trump's posture shifted. He leaned back. Arms folded. Jaw clenched. But the cameras caught the white in his knuckles. The tension rising beneath the mask. Denzel let the silence stretch. Not to perform, but to let it land. To let it hurt. This isn't about left or right, he said. It's not about Democrat or Republican. His voice dropped low. His eyes never left the lens. It's about a child. A girl who bled in silence, while her father told this country he cared about American families. One beat, then another. No one spoke. And then Denzel asked the question no one in the room could answer. So, what does a president do when his own daughter becomes the headline? The bracelet sat on the table like it was still bleeding. Trump hadn't looked at it, not directly, but the weight of it was visible in his hands, now clamped around the microphone, his breathing faster, eyes darting to his lawyer, to Denzel, to the cameras. And then he snapped. This is a disgrace, he roared, voice ricocheting off the marble. A disgrace to this committee, to this institution, to the presidency itself. He shoved his chair back, stood so hard the mic wobbled. She's lying. This is a witch hunt. A complete fabrication by a woman who doesn't even understand what it means to be an American. The room jolted. A ripple of gasps, like wind slamming dry leaves. But Denzel didn't move. Still seated, hands folded, eyes locked, face unreadable, not a single muscle twitched. Trump jabbed a finger across the table. You don't get to question me. You don't get to bring up my family, my name, and pretend you're some kind of hero. He pointed again, harder. This is political theater, and you are not the main act. Denzel Washington didn't move. He waited, calm still. He let the shouting bounce off the walls until it collapsed under its own weight. Then, slowly, he leaned in. His voice never rose. Just a whisper. But the mic caught every syllable. The truth won't be muted just because it's inconvenient. That line didn't need volume. It cut deeper because it didn't try to. It wasn't rage. It wasn't insult. It was surgical, and that made it undeniable. Trump's team scrambled. One lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically. Another flipped through folders, desperate for a clause, a line, anything to fight back. Behind them, producers paced behind the cameras, mouthing silent commands. But no one cut the feed. CNN stayed live. MSNBC didn't blink. Even Fox let it roll. Unscripted, unfiltered, undeniable. And in the middle of it all, Denzel Washington stood. Not abruptly, not for performance. He stood like a man who knew he had already won the case. "You cradled her once," he said, then erased her like a typo. "You kissed her forehead. You gave her a plush elephant. Then told the nurse, 'Don't bother writing down my name.'" His voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of a gavel. Now that child has a name, she has a face, she has a voice. And you can't bury that with press releases or pressure. Trump tried to interrupt again. "You're done. This is slander." Denzel didn't even blink. "No," he said sharply, "you're done. This isn't about winning a hearing. This is about whether you are the man you say you are to this nation." The room didn't gasp. It tightened. This time wasn't shock. It was anticipation. Then, behind the rows of aides and lawmakers, the rear door opened. No announcement, no introduction. Just a soft click of leather shoes, and a man walking in with purpose. Gray suit, thin frame, older, alert. He carried a leather folder under one arm, his face serious, haunted even. Denzel saw him. He didn't widen his eyes, didn't flinch, but his breath caught just enough to shift the rhythm. Because this man hadn't come to support. He came to twist the knife. He hadn't even sat down yet when it happened. A reporter in the back got a ping, then another, and another. Phones lit up like a chain reaction. Journalists leaned toward each other, checking screens. And then the murmur. Low, sharp, inevitable. One reporter stood, trembling slightly. He held up his phone. "Mr. Chairman, we've just confirmed a leaked message." The room went silent. Even Trump didn't speak. The room froze. Still, the reporter read slow, like he knew every word was about to detonate. "I told him this would come back." Melanian Trump text to aide. Timestamped 3:42 a.m. Gasps. Not because it was loud. Because it wasn't a denial. It wasn't rage. It was worse. Inevitability. A quiet confession whispered in the dark. Trump's face collapsed. Color gone. He turned to his staff, but found only blank stares. Shaking heads. No tweets. No statement. Just Melanian's silence. Louder than any press conference. Denzel stood still. Then he reached down, pressed play on a second recording. This one older, muffled, but clear enough to hit like a hammer. A man's voice. Cold, corporate, emotionless. "Look, Maria, we just want to help you move on. We're prepared to offer $130,000. No admission of anything. You'll sign the NDA. No press, no trouble, no more calls." The room seized. Denzel turned to the committee. That was 2013. The voice belongs to Robert Blaine, former legal consultant for the Trump Organization. Maria kept this voicemail for 11 years. He paused, let it hang in the air like a sword. She didn't want the money. She wanted her daughter to know where she came from. Trump's hands slammed the desk. "That call is fake. That's not gavel strike, Mr. President," the chairman barked. "You will remain silent unless recognized." Trump sat back, fuming, shaking, cornered. His legal team huddled tighter, eyes scanning exits, scanning reporters. But it was already too late. Because outside the chamber, the nation was already on fire. Within minutes, Lucia Trump, Melania, new hashtags, new bloodline, had exploded across social media. News anchors cut programming. Talk shows went live. Facebook flooded with side-by-side photos of Trump and the daughter he never claimed. Millions watched. Millions reacted. But inside the chamber, stillness. Denzel Washington stood firm. His voice unwavering. "The world knows now. Every truth. Every cover-up, every name that was paid to disappear." He turned slowly, not with rage, but with clarity, into the lens. Lucia never asked for fame. She never asked for headlines. All she ever wanted, Denzel Washington said, his voice nearly a whisper, was to be seen. And then, again, he let the silence speak. The world now knew. But the question wasn't what it had heard. It was what it would believe. The hearing hadn't ended, but the world outside the chamber, it had already detonated. Within minutes of Denzel placing the bracelet and pressing play on the voicemail, the hashtags ignited like a fuse. Hashtag Lucia Trump. Hashtag DNA on the Hill. Hashtag Justice for Lucia. What began as whispers turned into a digital roar. By noon, every major platform was drowning in it. TikTok clips of Denzel turning the photo hit 1 million views in under an hour. A slowed-down version of Lucia's voice, "I hope you see me," set to soft piano, was posted by activists, teachers, even veterans. One tweet read, "I voted for Rashim twice. I won't do it again." Outside Capitol, on the Hill, it began with quiet circles. Then thousands. Washington, D.C., New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Chicago. Homemade signs rose like flags. "She's not invisible. DNA doesn't lie. We believe Lucia." Black advocacy groups called it a modern-day reckoning. Latino organizations rallied behind Denzel, naming him the voice of every forgotten child. Immigration coalitions issued statements calling the hearing a historic inflection point in America's moral conscience. The streets echoed with chants, not rehearsed, but real. "Say her name, Lucia," over and over. In English, in Spanish, on live streams, through megaphones. The New York Times pushed its breaking headline early, "The Capitol DNA Reckoning." CNN called it the moment the myth cracked. Fox News hesitated, then showed the bracelet on loop. Uncut, undeniable. Late-night hosts scrapped their monologues. They quoted Denzel's lines like scripture. Analysts debated whether this was a scandal or a tragedy. But no one questioned its power. In classrooms across the country, students asked about Lucia. Teachers tried to explain what happens when truth hides in plain sight. In one fourth-grade class, students wrote letters to a girl they'd never met. They folded them, mailed them to Congress. Every corner of the country felt it. Yet somehow, in all that noise, the weight sat heaviest in one small house in San Antonio, because that's where Lucia was, curled up on a couch, watching it all unfold. She didn't say much. Didn't need to. She held a plush elephant in her lap, the one her mother had saved for 11 years. She watched Denzel's face. Watched her photo on the desk. Watched the country say her name. Her fingers traced the letters on the bracelet they had cut from her wrist, quiet, careful, as if remembering meant more than surviving. And in the middle of it all, a little girl waited for her name to be spoken without shame. The morning after the storm, Capitol Hill wasn't the same. The marble halls echoed, not just with footsteps, but with a new kind of pressure, the kind that builds when silence has run out. Inside the Oversight Committee chamber, every seat was taken. Denzel Washington sat in the front row. No folder, no envelope, just his voice. His allies sat beside him, posture straight, heads bowed, still in their silence. Across the aisle, the opposition wore the same suits, but they looked smaller now. The chairman gave the session into order, his voice steady, but the tension underneath unmistakable. "We are here," he began, "to consider a motion to open a formal investigation into allegations of presidential misconduct, specifically suppression of paternity evidence, misuse of humanitarian aid, obstruction of justice related to the concealment of a minor child." The words hit like lightning. And on cue, the pushback came. "This is a witch hunt." A Republican snapped. "A personal vendetta hijacking the government." Another shouted. "This is a circus." A smear campaign dressed up as legal theater. But even their own voices sounded thinner now. Denzel didn't speak. Not yet. He didn't need to. His silence did more damage than their shouting ever could. The chairman nodded to Representative Jaime Razin. Jaime stood slowly, as if the floor itself had weight. His hands didn't shake, but his voice carried the sound of something deeply personal. "I've seen political games," he began. "I've seen power abused. I've seen hearings twisted, truths buried. But I have never, most have never seen a man sit before this Congress and deny his own daughter." The room went still. Jaime looked across the aisle, then to Denzel, then straight into the camera. To the country, watching through every lens, every live stream. The room had already changed. Not just the air, but the weight of truth that refused to wait any longer. Denzel didn't stand for applause. He wasn't built for theatrics. He stood because the truth had waited long enough. No fanfare, no binder. Just a plain envelope placed on the table between him and the man who once held the most power in the world. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't flinch. Just slid the envelope across the polished wood with 2 fingers. "This is for the record," he said. Trump didn't touch it. Didn't even blink. But America saw the fear of a man finally cornered by something bigger than headlines. Denzel spoke with the calm weight of someone who had buried too many lies to let one more pass. Inside is a federally certified document. DNA confirmed. Court validated. Signed by your own attorney in 2013. He paused. Let the silence press. Then he opened the envelope himself. Pulled out a document. Held it up. This is Lucia Maria Alvarez's birth certificate, he said. Father listed, Donald John Trump. You could hear gasps, not the loud kind, but the kind that come when people realize they have just watched history turn. He laid the certificate beside the old photograph, the bracelet, the elephant, then one more paper, crumpled, handwritten in purple in Lucia's poem. One day I will be heard. Not by crowds or cameras, just by him. I will be more than silence. I will be seen. Denzel stood still. Let it land. This isn't revenge, he said finally. This is responsibility. This is what America is supposed to look like when it remembers who it's supposed to be. He stepped back. The room erupted. Not for politics. Not for performance. For truth. Final montage. Voiceover. Denzel Washington. They tried to ignore her, tried to bury her in paperwork, in power, in silence. But silence doesn't last. Lucia wasn't a scandal. She wasn't a political tool. She was a child forgotten by the powerful, remembered by the brave. And in the middle of all the noise, her voice found its way out. A letter, a poem, a truth too real to deny. I'm not hiding anymore, and neither are we. The closing thought continues. Truth doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits 11 years, in a pink backpack, in a child's whisper until someone brave enough says it out loud. So if her story found you, don't scroll past it. Carry it. Because if she can step into the light, maybe we all can.